Hey everybody, what's up? It is late. It is really, really late. It's past midnight. I just was hanging out with my brother for a little bit, and I decided to plow through the last few pages and finish up my readings for tonight. Where I go from here, we'll see, because I haven't really thought about what I'm planning on reading next in the world of comics, but I just got done reading this. This is my introduction to the Batman universe, because with Batman it's really hard to really figure it out, because there's a lot of comics and there's a lot of entry points. A lot of different ways you can go about getting into the Batman mythos. But from what I have seen in terms of research, this is the, at least to some, many people are saying, the proper way to get into knowing Batman. And I just got done reading it. So the book we're going to be discussing today is Batman Year One. So this is Frank Miller. You guys will know him, of course, for The Dark Knight Returns, which I eventually would like to read, but I'm just kind of taking this in the most appropriate way possible, not where it's all scattershot and I don't know certain things. I'm just trying to keep it as consistent as possible. So we're here with Batman Year One, my first Batman comic, and as the story goes, this is as the title suggests, this is the beginnings of the Batman character. Bruce Wayne comes back to Gotham City after some time, and simultaneously, a new lieutenant of the police force in Gotham City, James Gordon, also comes into town, moves in with his wife Barbara, and they're expecting a child. And the story shows two perspectives of on the vein of corruption, and two different ways of which these people go about dealing with the corrupted system. One of which being James Gordon, who we actually primarily focus on in the story, surprisingly. And we see how he deals with, the police force, kind of the corrupt cops, and his own moral dilemmas upon, being in the system, and just with it facing his own moralities, fundamentally speaking. Where in contrast to that, we have Bruce Wayne, who is wanting to clean up the city after, of course, a very infamous tragic event had happened to him at a young age. He has now built himself up now, and he's now forged himself into a specific being, and he's not perfect yet. He's not perfected his code, and he's, quite literally starting out as a Caped Crusader, which would be later named the Batman. And it's, as I said, about these two perspectives on the vein of corruption, and how they deal with it, one being in with the law and one being outside of the law. So So I was very surprised, actually, seeing that this is actually more or less a Jim Gordon story. Batman is a part of the story, and he does have a presence throughout the book. Bruce Wayne being a part of the story as it is, but the story is told through James Gordon's point of view, and it is mostly, in terms of who we follow in that story, it is pretty much that of James Gordon's arc. We see him arriving in Gotham City. We see him, how he deals with cops. We see how he deals with the presence of the Batman, and among other things here and there, which we'll get into. Um, One of which I was worried about, one plot line that I was worried about, and in some ways, I'm um, not as upset or as disappointed by the choice that they made towards the end, with the character, something that he ends up doing. Um, but but it's mainly his story, and Batman in the story is kind of used as a secondary plot line, again to kind of provide that contrast between a person in the law and outside of it. Um, and what I really appreciated the most about the story is their dealings and their own morality. With a lot of the dialogue or a lot of the writing, it's in conflict. It's about these characters always in conflict with themselves. Within the actions that they do, and in the case of like Bruce Wayne, Batman, one of my favorite parts of the book is when Bruce Wayne goes to like one of the roughest areas in Gotham City, and he he tries to do some he tries to try to try to get his feet wet, with dealing with bad people, and he doesn't do it the right way, or he doesn't do it in the way that is understandable. He beats the crap out of somebody. He almost gets arrested, and his identity is almost exposed. He puts himself in harm's way while also doing the harm simultaneously. You know, and that's where he starts to realize that maybe it's not through sheer force and aggression. Maybe it's through something else that maybe can instill the value upon individuals. Maybe it can be something like fear. And that's where the idea of the Batman starts to come into play, also with the idea being that as a young child, he always has had this fear for bats because he had a traumatic experience with it. So that forging with that symbol is where the Batman character kind of comes from. And I like that. And even as the Batman character, he is still having to deal with his own moral code. When he's first in the Batman suit and he is dealing with was it like some teenage kids or something like that on a rooftop or on the balcony, um, you see him, or you hear the writing play out, and you see that he's, you know, uh, always considering, his actions. He's not going to let that person fall because in his mind that is wrong. He's not going to do this or that, or he is going to do this or that because it is all in relation to his moral code that he is establishing that moral framework. And I really like that when we do get to explore the Batman character, which, like I said, kind of feels more like a secondary plot line in the story. But in terms of the main plot line that we are following with James Gordon's, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting, and I think that there are, for the most part, it's pretty of the same beat. But then some things happen with the character, specifically one thing, which I was curious to know where they were going to go with it, and that is the whole route of him cheating on his wife. Um, I didn't know how I felt about that when that first happened, when that was first presented, because I had started reading at that point, and I came back the next day to finish. So I was really wondering what they were going to do with that. Um, Basically, they played it out to where they do have feelings for each other, and they still continue to see each other. But eventually they stop cold turkey because it is just hurting them both deeply because they know there's no good end to this. And the Sarah character, the one that James is falling for, ends up leaving the police department altogether. So, and I like how he takes that. I like that how James deals with it. I like that shot with him holding the gun in the bedroom, with his wife sleeping, and he's talking about how the weight of the gun feels heavier than it usually does. I like these little things because it always reflects back to some moral framework, to reflective of their own morals and what happens when you jeopardize them, and how does it affect you. In the case of like James, it's great grief and guilt. It's not to where now all of a sudden everything changes and now I can just do whatever I want. It's guilt, you know And I like that that's the overall response, you know. And despite doing such a betrayal, he has the decency to at least tell his wife, and to at least, I mean, obviously he tries to hide it at first, and but eventually he does come around and does try to tell her, and stands by her, stands by with her and the baby, doesn't try to just abandon them or do whatever. He stands by his family. Um, so there's there's little nuances, to to the character, which I appreciate. It's little, but it's there. Um, but but beyond that, I do think that there are some issues that I take with the book. For instance, there are some characters that they have in the book that I just don't feel like needed to be there. One of which really being Catwoman. Um, I don't really see what the point of her being in the book was. She just kind of is just there, very briefly, mind you. Like she's there for a few pieces here and there, and then at some point she does become Catwoman, mainly by being inspired by the Batman and what he does. And they never have an interaction between the two either. I was expecting that. I was expecting Batman to meet Catwoman and they would have like some kind of exchange, maybe to like talk about each other or something like that, something to like give her more merit to the story. But she's not. She's pretty much doing it solo. They actually do have one encounter of each other when Bruce goes to those streets, because this Selena Kyle, I believe, as far as I can read into it, she is a prostitute, and she's living a very hard life, um, very degrading life, and uh, and uh, she's wanting, she just doesn't feel valued. And when she starts to see the Batman and seeing that, oh, you can just be independent, you can just start doing your own kind of thing, that's when she's motivated to become her own vigilante and become the Catwoman character. um, but beyond that, I mean, she doesn't have a whole lot of fundamentals to her. She doesn't play a strong part into the story. um, she's just kind of is just doing her thing. So, I don't really think we needed her in the story. I just feel like she's just kind of is just there just because, and a lot of times that's what it feels like with Catwoman as a character. She just feels like she's just there. Um, I also feel like, in setting up this whole side plot of James like cheating, it would have been nice to have set up Barbara a little bit, to have set up a little bit more about her. um, getting to know more about her as a person. We get, I think, literally one page or two about that with James and Barbara interacting with each other. They interact a little bit more later on, but that's after the affair has happened. I would have liked if some more stuff had happened with them before the affair, so that when the betrayal happens, it actually hits a little bit harder. Um, so, and more importantly, or at least just my more of a fundamental thing about the book in general, um, it does have some intrigue, slowly. My apologies. Um, though there is some intrigue within its study of corruption, it's also a little bit hollow, because once you get the gist of it, that is pretty much what it is. It isn't more than that. It is pretty much just about the corruption that is set within the city, and the systematic, injustices that are taking place. Um, like once you get that as the jits, that is pretty much the story in and of itself. Um, so there isn't more layerings or peelings of its study. It is just the matter of what it's speaking on, and that is basically it. Um, kind of surface level to some extent. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with the characters, even though I feel as though that in a book called Batman Year One, it is mainly that of a story of James Gordon. Um, I would have preferred if Batman had more utilization, if he was more up and center. But I don't mind the story of what we got, with James and seeing how he navigates through Gotham City while simultaneously also seeing, the Batman character exist, or being developed, because there's a point to it. Because, like I said, it's showing you that contrast between somebody who lives in the law and someone outside of it, and those two perspectives on corruption and the system as it stands. There is a point to it, and for that I give it merit. I just feel as though that the depth of that story is is a little bit surface, and some factors to the story also just feel either underutilized or just non-existent. Like I said, something like Catwoman, I don't feel like needed to exist in the book, um, and characters like Barbara, I just feel like needed to be developed more in order for me to feel, more of their, more of their presence, but also in building up other aspects of the story, like that betrayal that happens later on. So, but it's a good introduction, and it's definitely sets up for other things in the future. Setting up the Joker. So if I were to continue, there is stuff like that. And this particular book, I know, kind of inspired a lot of the Batman media out there. I know there's an animated movie that's inspired by this comic, and I believe that it also acts as an inspiration for the Nolan film Batman Begins, if I'm not mistaken, and partially that to Matt Reeves' Batman. So this book does have, some inspirations here and there, but I think it's more to do with environment and mood, not necessarily what the story is. Story wise, kind of in terms of what Matt Reeves' Batman is after, um, but fundamentally, I mean, there are large differences. So, but generally, as a read, I enjoyed it. I just think though it could have had more going on in terms of a layering, in terms of a subtext. But as per what is on the surface, it's intriguing, and you have an interesting, very interesting writing to go with it. Which I had said I really like how the writing always is displaying that question about morality, and I really like how that plays to the characters and the general contrast and perspective. So it's a good read. It's a good introduction to the Batman character and to just Gotham in general. They definitely take their time to also really emphasize how run down and just dirty, the city is. I really feel that when reading the book. I can feel just how just filthy, just things are in this city. So so stuff like that they really, hone in on, and it works really well. I just wish that there was just more spoken than what was left on the surface for me. So, but but yeah, I enjoy the book, and we'll see where I end up. I don't know where I'm gonna go next. I maybe will follow through with Batman. I am wanting to read the George Perez run of Wonder Woman. I've been needing to get into that. I'll be honest with you, I might also just go back to reading the Superman comic because I've been kind of curious to go back to Superman. Um, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see where things end up. But for now, those are my thoughts on Batman Year One. You guys know your thoughts on Batman Year One if you guys have read it, and and I know that I believe it's called the Man Who Laughs. I think that's where I would end up going next for Batman because that's where the Joker storyline begins. Um, so that's where I'd probably end up going next. But you guys may know, and if there are any comics, of course, Batman related or otherwise, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I know the Absolute Batman series is going on, and I've heard that is actually pretty good. Um, I would prefer to read up on Batman proper before I get into something like that. But let me know all your thoughts relating to comics and Batman specifically in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.